This strange ecosystem we call computer games boasts an array of frighteningly unique experiences, and the subject of today's video is no exception. I'd like to shed some much-deserved light on a project that's quite difficult to put into words, so why not let the music speak for itself? HYPERBEAT is the name of this hypnotic rhythm game, introspective social sim, and dress-up extravaganza all mashed into one. It was created and published by Alice Bettino and Chance Wallen of Dreamware Media in October of 2025. Since it's featured in the Computer World's showcase, and because it's just that cool, I asked the two of them a few questions about their history, inspirations, and hopes and dreams. Created as a part of the Seattle Indies 2022 Slow Jam, HYPERBEAT was originally called Hyper Night.
Hyper Night.
And when I asked the team if they'd always dreamt of making a rhythm game together, programmer and artist Alice chimed in with, "Quite the opposite, actually. I was always told not to make a rhythm game because they're an absolute pain to make. Having now shipped HYPERBEAT, I can say that those warnings are not to be taken lightly. I originally had been trying to make a sort of tube-based platformer like the old Flash game Run, but it was not going very well. And 1 week into a 2-week jam, I decided to pivot, and was messing around with the fly around the tunnel movement input, and accidentally stumbled into the rhythm part of it."
Combo.
Despite the warnings they received,
Finish.
the pair clearly has a love for rhythm games, citing DDR, Guitar Hero, OS, and Patapon as childhood favorites. For Alice, that last one specifically played a large part in the overall weirdness of HYPERBEAT, quote, "especially in the way that it was just not like anything else. Patapon felt so utterly free of the shackles of convention, and we definitely aimed for that with HYPERBEAT." My own experience with rhythm games mainly consists of those first two titles, DDR and Guitar Hero, which I always associated with a pretty steep difficulty curve and unforgiving fail states. Chance, responsible for the game's music, narrative, and business side of things, recalls having similar memories, explaining, "This is exactly why we didn't use a fail state on the project. It sucks when you're bad at a rhythm game and it basically tells you to fuck off. Growth happens when we can fail over and over again, so we wanted to make the game a safe space to do so." By now, you've likely noticed that HYPERBEAT isn't your ordinary game, and has quite a few extra features not found in any of the classic rhythm games mentioned earlier. First, there's the character you play as, a knight-errant who stumbled upon this mysterious grove called the Wellspring. For this, Alice took inspiration from Demon's Souls Nexus, while the character Blue is derived in part from the Crestfallen Warrior, and the stained glass level select portraits are similar in function to the portals in Crash Bandicoot 2 and Spyro. The inclusion of this tranquil hub area is in direct opposition to the sometimes exhausting arcade nature of rhythm games, which the team wanted to both break up and make more accessible. Each track has 3 difficulty options to choose from, there are a variety of input methods players can use to control the knight, and the hub is available to return to at any time. Aside from relaxing, the Wellspring is also a place for introspection and conversing with HYPERBEAT's ensemble cast. Here's what Chance had to say about dialogue. "While some of the dialogue is somewhat campy and extreme, there are many pieces of myself in the characters' stories. We live in a world that celebrates people for things that the market values and disregards people that don't fit into those boxes. Making a video game, especially a weird one in a weird genre, was quite a daunting task, and we didn't know fully what we were getting ourselves into." As for the game's overall knightly theme, Alice just really wanted to give the character a halberd, because halberds are cool. I originally jumped into HYPERBEAT around launch last October, not knowing what to expect aside from the flashy gameplay and catchy music of the trailer. And on the very top of that list of things I wasn't expecting was extreme character customization. Boasting over 100 cosmetic options, Chance described this dress-up feature as being something many people looked at us sideways for adding, but also recalled how some of Alice and his favorite parts of games were getting to play dress-up, again noting FromSoft as an inspiration. While Dark Souls isn't the first game that comes to mind for me when thinking about fashion in games, it does bring up an interesting point about the different memories and experiences people take away from their favorite titles. To me, what sticks out is the series' level of challenge, the knowledge of combat items and enemies that must be learned to master each area, and its level design. For Dreamware, they took away the feeling of calmness provided by areas of rest in an otherwise hostile world, and an extensive wardrobe. As Alice put it, cosmetics were originally introduced as a simple reward mechanism for progression and to add visual variety to the NPCs. But once I got the system up and running, it really stole the show, to the point that now the game sometimes feels like a dress-up game with rhythm elements. The 5 knights you convene with in the Wellspring each have their own track list and cosmetics to unlock, but what shines through most are their unique personalities. Originally proposed by Alice was the idea of having each represent a sort of creative archetype, which Chance then wove into witty and relatable dialogue. He said, "The story of HYPERBEAT is that of chasing your potential. Each character is based on archetypes of people we've met on our journey, and I think everyone has a bit of every character inside of them depending on where they are in life." Here's a picture of my notes from Alice and I's first brainstorming sessions. It happened on the patio of my apartment during a thunderstorm. I think it's about time I address the elephant in the room. The music. Specifically, creating the soundtrack for a rhythm game where the music is one of its standout features. As a classically trained pianist, Chance often felt overwhelmed by the competitive, cutthroat nature of the music scene, and eventually gravitated towards experimenting with making weird music on the computer, saying, "I really loved how these artists were recontextualizing sounds and instruments, unrestrained from the limitations of live playing or the expectations of what genre says it should sound like. Instead of thinking in genre, I found a community in feeling and intuition." For the in-game songs, I made over 150 beats for the project, many of them made in individual sessions that I did light changes to. I wanted to preserve the rough nature of the tracks that held onto the emotional thread more than anything. One of my favorite songs off the OST, Neptune, was made in 17 minutes. Looking back, this raw and expressive electronic bass for the soundtrack seems like the only truly fitting match for HYPERBEAT's chunky, sparky visuals, and Chance noted that Alice had a very cool philosophy when it came to mapping songs, by letting the song inform the chart and letting that lead the design process instead of the other way around. I never changed the song for the game at all. Clearly, these two were meant to work with each other. Alice's animation, the perfect vessel for Chance's music, with the knight's bizarre walking animation when on the ground, transforming into a gravity-defying dance once the beat kicks in. Her art to his prose, the characters they came up with during that storm filling the Wellspring with life and personality. The duo are childhood friends who bonded over a love of, or possibly a hate for geometry in their high school class, and are currently living in the same apartment building. This makes it easy for them to get together and collaborate at the spur of the moment, with Chance sometimes showcasing his newest work-in-progress song in the car on their way to pick up a burger. The pair has just released their big multiplayer mode update alongside the Computer Worlds event, with continued updates planned for the future, including a user-friendly map editor to make custom charting easier. And some final words from Alice. "All I know is that we've got more fire in our hearts than ever, and we want to keep making weird and cool shit. What form that will end up taking, who knows?"